Nice to see you. Nice to be together with Tuesday Tea Time. Letting the sound of the bell come to our ears. A lot of what she focused on in her conversation was around knowing what leads to greed and aversion and delusion, and knowing what leads to the absence of greed and aversion and delusion. And so as we sit, that's why sometimes I say notice skillful and unskillful. We notice what comes in the mind, and we can notice when something wholesome comes into the mind and when something unwholesome comes in the mind. But we're just present with, especially at the start, holding ourselves gently and in kindness so that we can feel relaxed and at ease with whatever comes to the foreground. One of the things that Ayya spoke with us about on Sunday had to do with the willingness to ask what we really want to cultivate. And that, as she says, requires that we know our minds. And we want to cultivate kindness and objectivity and clarity and acceptance and willingness to see what has been cultivated and being present with this simple choice to be happy, letting go of what is not of service, letting go of what is unskillful, and cultivating what is skillful. And so as we settle into our place, we can just notice our breathing that can help us be grounded in this moment. Being grounded in this body, seated on our chair, cushion, whatever beneath us. Having the groundedness of our feet touching the floor, our hands resting in our laps or at our sides. Beginning to be more familiar with and comfortable in this body, in this place, as this cauldron of our breath. And we're reminded that this is a path of practice. And we can remind ourselves, as Virinyani mentioned, about understanding how imperfect this world is. And this is where Metta comes in. That we want to be gracious with ourselves and with others. And so if we start out in our meditation time holding ourselves in kindness and knowing that we want to live in accord with our highest aspirations, it's a path of practice and it's in an imperfect world, so we want to be kind and at ease. Just reining in the mind, giving it something to do, paying attention to the breath at the nostrils or the belly, being present with what is. Not too complicated. The mind is usually what gives us plenty of complication, but we can also just remember that the mind is one of the senses. Just like hearing and seeing and tasting and touching and smelling. And so we remind ourselves to be content with this moment. And what is happening in this moment. And we can continue with the breath or the touch point as the anchor of our practice that we return to. And if we find ourselves roaming off in a lot of thoughts, we can notice that with mindfulness. We are not our thoughts. Thoughts are something that continue happening. We might see them as pleasant or unpleasant. We might notice when we're grasping or clinging to some thoughts or pushing away some other thoughts. Or maybe we wake up in the middle of sort of a daydream and it's a kind of confusion, delusion area, in which case we just wake up right there and notice that thinking is happening. We can return to the breath, or we can stay with a little more open awareness to be alert and aware of what comes to us at any of the senses, any of the sense doors, while holding ourselves in kindness and in compassion. being present with what arises. As Virinyani mentioned, being present with this simplicity gives us a choice to be happy. If we choose what is useful, or notice what we might otherwise might not be useful, we can make this choice as best we can, this simple choice of renouncing what is unhelpful, renouncing what leads to greed, hatred, and aversion, delusion. Just noticing wholesome and unwholesome as it arises without judgment. We come to the practice with habits that are conditioned. That's where we begin to ask ourselves what we want to cultivate. And this is why we want to get to know our minds objectively, with acceptance and willingness to see what has arisen that has been cultivated. And so in this cradle of kindness and compassion for ourselves, seeing what's in this present moment right now, and right now, and right now. And if the mind wanders, we can wake up and ask, what are we cultivating in that moment? Distraction or zoning out, maybe not enough energy to bring the mind back. Maybe we actually are aware enough to notice that we're cultivating distraction in that moment. But as soon as we have mindful awareness there and we notice what we're cultivating, we can bring ourselves back. We're cultivating new habits. That of being in the present moment, that of seeing clearly when we're noticing repetition of thoughts or repetitions of habits in the mind, where the mind always goes to out of habit, and just noticing that we can let go a little more. We can use the breath as the anchor, or the more open, spacious awareness to be with what arises at each of the sense doors, but we're at ease yet alert. When we notice the mind wandering, we can just remind ourselves, what are we cultivating in that moment? And we can bring ourselves into the present moment. Once again, inclining toward the wholesome, inclining towards being awake, staying awake in this moment, seeing clearly what might be what leads us to greed and aversion and delusion, or the absence of these. We remind ourselves when we notice there's the absence of ill will, the absence of grasping and clinging, or more contentment. That desire to cultivate what is wholesome, kindness, the Brahma-viharas, kindness and compassion, joy and equanimity, right here in this moment for ourselves. Again and again and again, bringing the mind gently back to being present and awake and interested with just enough effort to be able to be with and see clearly what's happening.
wholesome, unknown.
Breath by breath, we come back to the present moment, asking ourselves with curiosity, what is happening now? We just begin where we are. If we're alert and aware, we can't help but notice that, as the Buddha pointed out, the whole of the Buddha's path is seeing pleasant contact and how hardwired we are to fulfill our desires. This can immediately bring us craving and clinging, and that it has a cost. And so we may notice where we're clinging to something, how this habit pattern returns, and how we can hold ourselves kindly with compassion and let go of what doesn't serve us and continue inclining the heart and mind with kindness and compassion for ourselves over and over again, to stay aware and interested in this moment and noticing the impermanence of this moment. We might notice the cause and effect that skillful and wholesome or unskillful and unwholesome actions, thoughts, and actions have as their consequences. Realizing that whatever we plant has its results. And so we want to keep planting mind moments of skillful thought, acknowledging non-harming and non-greed and non-delusion when it's there, noticing contentment with less, letting go of the grasping and clinging, all the while holding ourselves with kindness and letting this kindness envelop us, this boundless heart of well-being. and allowing the spaciousness in this boundless heart of well-being, this place of kindness, allowing it to include others. Holding whoever comes into our heart space, friend, family member, relatives, animals. Letting our hearts be contented with what's happening, being open to holding others in our heart space that they may themselves be free from harm and be safe and protected. May they be at ease. And as we hold ourselves in this well-wishing of well-being and compassion for ourselves when things are difficult, may we hold others, those that are near and dear to us, as well as others less familiar. Neutral people. Someone you saw recently if you went to the store, or someone you may have seen outside your window, or maybe even on your device or on TV, that we can cultivate this kindness for all beings. Remembering that this helps us let go of fear and embrace love and kindness. Remembering that when the Buddha taught these practices of the Brahma Viharas to his monks in the woods who came to him being afraid of the animals and creatures in the forests of India where they were keeping their own company at the foot of a tree, and they wanted to leave the area, the Buddha taught them loving kindness, to continue regularly wishing others to be free from harm, safe and protected, even those animals that they were afraid of. And that it brought them to be free from fear, and it brought kindness to the beings around them. And so we can do that ourselves. We're not sitting at the foot of a tree and there aren't animals all around us like snakes or, poisonous insects or roaming animals in the woods at night. We have other things that bring us fear, thinking ahead, or people that we aren't happy with, or people that we are happy with. May we hold all beings gently in our hearts, that all beings may be happy and free, and we cultivate this loving kindness for ourselves and for others, and it has a completely circular effect, being in an ocean of kindness that knows no bounds. It's called the boundless heart. It's referred to as the boundless heart in the loving kindness sutta. So we hold within our heart all beings. those beings that we know about and those beings that we are unfamiliar with, unknown to us. Those beings that we might have some fear of or maybe dislike towards. All beings are deserving of our kindness and our care as it builds up this kindness for ourselves that, we've mentioned before that the development of the Brahma Viharas, the development of Metta and loving kindness brings friendship to us. It brings openness to us. Not to mention that we're supposed to have better dreams and that poisons can't kill us. At least that was in the Buddhist time. And, they had a lot of poison around with snakes and things that would bite them, scorpions. And may we have kindness for all beings. May all beings everywhere be free from harm, safe and protected, and have ease and well-being. Those above and below, around and everywhere. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. Anicca vata sankhara upadavaya domino upakitava meruchanti te samvipasamo sukho. All conditioned things. Everything that comes to our senses is conditioned. It's due to conditions that brought it together and comes to our senses. All conditioned things arise and pass away. And seeing this clearly with mindfulness, this is where mindfulness comes in, with clarity, seeing clearly the impermanent nature. This brings the greatest happiness. And what is that happiness? It's not grasping towards something that we want to acquire or having things be pleasant all the time. That happiness is non-greed, non-delusion, non-harming, free from suffering. And so seeing this clearly with mindfulness brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. Thank you for your practice. May it bring you joy in this very moment and other moments. And may we really feel directly that this benefits all beings.